The click of the badge reader was just a sound. Same as always. A little green light, the soft hum of the glass door sliding open, and the smell of over-roasted coffee from the kitchenette down the hall. But that morning, something about it made me hesitate. Not long, just a beat, like muscle memory waiting for something that wasn't going to be there anymore. I shifted my weight, let the glass door finish opening, and stepped into a place that used to feel like mine. The hallway was quiet, Monday quiet, fluorescents humming low, a monitor screensaver bouncing in someone's cubicle, the faint scratch of someone's Spotify playlist playing too low to identify. But the thing that stuck out most was what was missing. No keyboard clacking from my pod. No, hey, you made it in early from Rosa. And no chair creak from the corner, where, for 5 years, I built everything I thought mattered. It was the first day after the switch, after I trained Lucas, and technically after I handed him my seat. 3 weeks earlier, it had all sounded temporary. Just a knowledge transfer, my manager Steve had said, scratching at his temple like the words were giving him a headache. You've got the deepest handle on the API integrations, and leadership wants redundancy on the Hembry rollout. Lucas will shadow you a few weeks, take notes, watch how you structure the client-side handshakes. Lucas who? Lucas Byrne. New hire. Just started. MIT kid, sharp. You'll like him. I didn't like him. And it had nothing to do with the school, the resume, or even him, really. It was the feeling. The one in your gut when a dog walks through your yard too long. A subtle, unspoken sense that something was being sniffed out. The first time Lucas sat beside me, he pulled out a mechanical pencil like it was a scalpel and said, "So, you built the backbone of the Hembry product tree?" I didn't like that either. Not the question, the wording, the angle. He was right. I had built it, but the way he said it, it wasn't awe. It was inventory. Let me back up a second. My name's Tom. I'm 36. Senior backend developer at CollarTech, a mid-sized SaaS firm based out of Portland, Oregon. I've been here 8 years, which in tech is practically veteran status. I'm not flashy. I don't go to networking events or give TED Talks about cloud elasticity. I build stable code bases. I document. I debug at midnight if the app breaks. I run point with our B2B clients when no one else wants to. Most importantly, I don't screw people over. But that's not the kind of rule that keeps you safe. Turns out, that's just the kind of rule that makes you a great stepping stone. Lucas showed up like most new hires do, overdressed and overconfident. Pressed shirt, messenger bag, espresso in a reusable cup with a sticker that said, "Move fast, fix things." Cute. He called me sir for the first 2 days, then started calling me T, like we were locker room buddies. He was fast. I'll give him that. Picked up our tech stack in record time. Understood the logic trees almost too quickly. But more than anything, he watched. Every move, every keyboard shortcut, every call I had with product, every Slack thread where I pushed back on marketing's insane deadlines. At first, I thought it was eagerness. Then, I saw his screen one afternoon when I walked past the break room. He wasn't taking notes. He was replicating my scripts, line by line. I mentioned it to Steve, offhand. "Hey, just making sure this is still just for coverage redundancy, right?" Steve looked up from his laptop like I'd asked him if the moon was still there. Yeah, of course. You're still lead on Hembry. He's just, absorbing." Absorbing. Right. That week, Lucas started scheduling one-on-ones with the product manager without CCing me. He rewrote one of my helper functions without telling me, then pushed it to dev. When I asked, he shrugged and said, "It shaved a millisecond off load time. Figured you'd appreciate it." I didn't, but I said nothing. Because I'd been trained to be a team player. The shift happened on a Tuesday, the one after Labor Day. September air, cool and damp, leaves just starting to turn in the parking lot outside. We had a team-wide sync at 9 a.m. Product, engineering, marketing all in the same room to go over the Q4 roadmap. I sat near the back. Just a notebook and black coffee. No slides. I wasn't presenting. Lucas was. He took the front with a clicker and said, "This is a proposed streamlining of the Hembry integration based on recent back-end restructuring." The deck clicked forward. It was my restructure. Down to the phrasing in the comments. No citation. No thanks to Tom's groundwork. No nod. Nothing. He owned it like he'd thought it up on a bus ride in. I looked at Steve. He was nodding. I looked at Rosa. Her eyes darted toward me, then back to the screen. I didn't say anything. My mouth was dry. Lucas ended his pitch with a little smile and said, "We should see a 30% latency drop across clients. That's what I'm targeting anyway." The room clapped. Not loudly, but enough. After the meeting, Steve clapped me on the back like I was a ghost. "See, he's a killer," he said. I nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak yet. My hands were warm. Not angry warm, just empty. Like I'd been carrying something for so long, I forgot what it felt like not to hold it. That night I stayed late, opened my project folders, looked at the creation dates, the commit history, my name time-stamped across 6 months of builds, my logic trees, my architectures, mine. But no one knew that now. Or worse, no one cared. The next day, Lucas had my desk. Steve framed it like an optimization. "Closer to the whiteboard, easier for collab," he said. They moved me to the other side of the floor. No sunlight, no window. Next to the server rack, which hummed all day like a dentist drill. The chair was smaller. The monitor had a dead pixel. Lucas passed me once around noon and said, "Appreciate all the groundwork, man. Seriously." I just looked at him. Didn't blink. Didn't smile. He smiled for both of us and kept walking. That was a week ago. This morning, when I badged in and felt that hesitation in my chest, it wasn't dread. Not exactly. It was a beginning. Because last night, I opened a private repo, and I started writing something new. The first few lines of code I wrote in that private repo weren't impressive. They weren't even useful yet. They were just mine. No Jira ticket. No approval queue. No collaboration sync with Lucas. Just raw logic, scratched out like a personal journal. A function here, a test scaffold there. Nothing groundbreaking, but it breathed. It had my rhythm. And that night, for the first time in months, I remembered what it felt like to create without guarding every line. The following morning, I came in early. Not because I had to, because I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that smirk Lucas gave me by the server rack. The way Steve kept saying "killer" like it was a compliment. And the worst part? I realized I hadn't looked at the Hembry rollout document in over a week. Not since Lucas took it over. So I logged into Confluence, clicked through the repo links, scanned the build notes, and there it was, version 4.31. Major backend efficiency improvements implemented by Lucas Byrne. No mention of the initial scaffolding. No mention of me. Even the architecture diagrams had been redrawn, with different names for the function blocks I'd built. He hadn't just taken credit. He'd rewritten the history. Now, you might be wondering, why didn't I report it? Why not go to HR or Steve or, hell, blast it on the team's Slack? Because if you've worked in tech long enough, you learn something ugly. Proof doesn't always matter. Narrative does. Lucas had the narrative now. The fresh blood. The fast thinker. The fixer. I was just the guy who showed him the ropes. And the more I pushed, the more I'd look like the bitter one. That's the trap. When they take your seat, they don't do it violently. They make you complicit. They make it feel like you let them. Rosa stopped by my new desk that afternoon. She was holding a lukewarm cup of tea, the bag still floating inside. "You okay?" I shrugged. "Yeah." She hesitated, looked around. "He used your thread handler. I saw it in his new build." "I know. You gonna say anything?" "To who?" Rosa didn't answer, just looked down at her tea like it might tell her what to do. Then she whispered, "You're not crazy." I think that was the kindest thing anyone said to me all week. That night, I stayed late. Again. Not for the Hembry project. For the new one. I didn't have a name for it yet. Just a series of modular back-end services built to mirror some of our core B2B logic. Cleaner, leaner, and API neutral. Something that could stand alone. I built it in silence. Just the hum of the server rack and the occasional creak of the office air vent. Every so often, I'd reach for my thermos out of habit and forget I hadn't refilled it since lunch. Around 10:30, I heard footsteps. Lucas. He didn't see me. He was heading back to his desk, probably forgot something. He moved differently when he thought no one was watching. No swagger, no smirk, just focused. He opened his laptop, plugged in his external SSD, copied a folder. I didn't say a word, but I took note of the folder name, Demo Final. And then I did something I probably shouldn't have. I waited until he left. Then I walked to his desk, and I looked. Let me be clear. I didn't open anything protected. No passwords, no snooping through Slack DMs or emails, just the dev folder. And there it was, my helper library, rewritten, rebranded, but the function naming logic, the internal comments, all mine. Some were word for word. That's when the decision became real. I copied the folder name, wrote it on a Post-it, and stuck it inside my notebook with one word, remember. The next day, I started logging timestamps for everything I worked on. Every new function, every Git commit, every Slack conversation where I provided support. Not for bragging rights, for a paper trail. I started looping Rosa into questions on the new project I was building. Just a little side thing, I said. Trying something modular. She raised an eyebrow. You planning on jumping ship? I smiled, but didn't answer. Truth was, I didn't know yet, but the thought had started to itch. Then, a small thing happened that changed everything. Lucas made a mistake. A real one. He committed a change to the main branch that broke the API handshake for 3 of our largest clients. Suddenly, Hembry's staging environment was spitting 502 errors across the dashboard. It was after lunch. Slack lit up like a slot machine. Clients were noticing. Marketing was panicking. Steve was silent. And Lucas? He was scrambling. I watched him from across the floor. Saw the panic creep into his posture. The hand running through his hair. The mouse clicks getting faster. The Slack messages firing off like desperate flares. He hadn't versioned the rollback. And worse, he didn't understand what broke. Because he didn't build it. Rosa messaged me. Rosa, 2:07 p.m. Not to stir anything, but, you seeing this? Me, 2:08 p.m. Yeah. Rosa, 2:09 p.m. You know how to fix it, don't you? I didn't answer right away. Then I got the ping. Steve, 2:12 p.m. Tom, got a sec? Here we go. Steve looked like he hadn't blinked in 10 minutes. His laptop had 5 Slack threads open. He turned to me, desperate but trying not to show it. Lucas hit a snag. Yeah, I saw. You, think you could take a quick look? Just, fresh eyes. I leaned against the doorframe. Didn't move, didn't nod, just let the pause sit. Then I said, sure. Walked in, opened the file, and within 5 minutes, I rolled back the broken call and patched the handshake. Lucas stood behind me, hands on hips, nodding like he was part of the fix. Steve clapped once. Nice save. And I didn't even look up when I said, maybe next time, whoever's claiming the code should understand it first. Lucas didn't smile after that. Not the way he used to. And Rosa? She slipped me a sticky note later that day. No words, just a little doodle. A ghost inside a machine. And for the first time in weeks, I laughed. Not loud, just enough to feel like myself again. That night, I added 3 new modules to the private repo. Gave it a name, Sentinel, because that's what it was now. Not just code, a watchtower. And I was done letting people climb it to claim the view. The invitation came in late on a Friday. Subject line, Private Strategy Review, Monday at 11:30 a.m., Conf Room B. No explanation, no calendar invite. Just a terse one-liner from Steve. Need you in this, Tom. Bring your latest work. It wasn't like him to be vague, and it sure wasn't like him to ask for my work. Not since Lucas had become the go-to guy for every demo, deck, and deliverable with a graph on it. I stared at the email for a long time. Clicked it open. Closed it. Reopened it. Then I started packing. I didn't tell anyone about the Sentinel repo, not even Rosa. It wasn't out of paranoia. It was protection. There was no NDA yet, no formal backing, no funding, just code, just logic, just a quiet refusal to let someone else name what I had built. But I had to admit, it was turning into something real. By Sunday evening, I had 5 integrated modules, 1 adaptive handshake engine, and a fully deployable API wrapper that could plug into 4 of our biggest clients' stacks without touching legacy code. Lightweight, modular, clean. Most importantly, it worked. It didn't need a pitch deck. It ran. Monday morning, the city was damp again. Fall drizzle against the windshield, streaking slow under the wipers. I sat in the parking garage for a full 2 minutes before going inside. Didn't check my phone. Didn't scroll. Just breathed. At 11:27 a.m., I walked into Conference Room B. Lucas was already there. So was Steve. And someone new. Gray suit, wire-rimmed glasses, polished demeanor that screamed VP without having to say it. Steve stood when I entered. Tom, good. Thanks for making time. Lucas gave me a tight-lipped smile. The kind you give a goalie right before a penalty kick. The guy in the suit stood and offered a hand. Brandon Fan, he said. Strategic Ops. Ah, the suits had landed. What followed was a textbook setup. Lucas kicked off the meeting with a polished walkthrough of his rollout strategy for Hembry. Slide transitions, efficiency charts, buzzwords like scalability and B2B ecosystem resilience. I stayed silent. Brandon nodded a few times, then steepled his fingers. Looks like strong work, but I'd like to see Tom's project next. Lucas blinked. Steve cleared his throat. Brandon didn't waver. You mentioned a side repo, yes? I looked at Steve. He didn't look back. So he had told them. I reached into my backpack, pulled out a thumb drive, and plugged it into the display laptop. No slides, no branding, just the code. I launched a demo shell, ran the test suite, then deployed the real-time mockup. 4 client environments, real-time sandbox data, 0 errors. Then I spoke. This doesn't replace Hembry, it supplements it. Modular build, plug-and-play flexibility, no need for client-side retraining. Handles legacy loadouts, and scales forward. Been running stable for 2 weeks. I paused. It's called Sentinel. Brandon didn't say anything right away. Then he smiled and said, That's what I wanted to see. Lucas didn't speak for the rest of the meeting. Steve asked one technical question, which I answered in 5 words. By the time I pulled the drive and packed up, Brandon stood and offered his hand again. Don't let this go stale, he said quietly. I want to see a roadmap. Steve nodded, a little too quickly. Lucas stayed seated, eyes low. Back at my desk, Rosa wheeled her chair over. You were gone a while. I looked at her. I think I just got promoted without a title. She frowned. What does that mean? I showed her the folder, let her run the sandbox demo. She leaned back, arms crossed. Tom, this is good. I know. No, it's really good. I nodded. Then why do you look like you just buried something? I didn't answer right away, because she wasn't wrong. There was a heaviness in me. Not guilt, not even revenge. Something quieter, something like grief. Because here's what they don't tell you about being replaced. It's not just the work. It's you. Your rhythms, your integrity, your dumb, stubborn way of caring about things no one notices. You train someone, and they copy the gestures. But they don't copy the weight. That can't be transferred. That has to be carried. And when they leave you out of the story, they're now telling the company, the one you built line by line, that weight just hangs there, unclaimed. 2 days later, Steve sent out an all-team email. Subject line, back-end restructure, new project lead. He didn't name it Sentinel. He didn't explain. He just wrote, we're pivoting part of our stack to a more modular build. Effective immediately, Tom will serve as lead architect for the new system. Lucas will continue his work on Hembry integrations. No congratulations. No welcome meeting. Just a cold clinical statement that stripped away what it meant. I stared at the screen, felt nothing. Rosa walked by and whispered, Victory? I smiled, but it wasn't real. That afternoon, Lucas stopped by my desk, leaned on the divider wall. I didn't know you were working on a whole build, he said. I clicked save on my terminal, didn't look up. Wasn't sure it mattered. It does, he said, clearly. Silence. Then he added, You're good. I finally turned, looked him in the eye. You're fast, I said, but you don't know how to wait. He tilted his head, unsure. I didn't elaborate. He walked away. That night I stayed in the office late again. But this time, I wasn't writing new code. I was cleaning, commenting every block, documenting the roadmap, refactoring for long-term readability. Because I knew something now. This wasn't just mine anymore. Not because they'd take it, but because I was finally ready to give it, on my terms. If Lucas wanted to claim something else next quarter, let him. But not this. Not Sentinel. Because it had my name carved into every quiet choice. And even if no one else saw it, I would. 2 weeks passed. No fanfare. No formal rollout. Just a quiet shifting of emails, requests, and late-night questions that now landed in my inbox instead of Lucas's. I wasn't gunning for power. I didn't want a team or a corner office or one of those wobbly glass plaques they hand out at Q4 all hands. I wanted the code to stand. I wanted it to be undeniable. And to be honest, part of me wanted to see what Lucas would do next. He didn't disappoint. The first test came on a Thursday morning. Client name, Duval Partners. One of our biggest legacy holdouts. Old code, old systems, terrified of updates. We'd tried for years to streamline them without risking their custom invoice logic or their finicky accounting exports. Sentinel changed that. I'd built one of the modules specifically with them in mind, an adaptive handshake layer that could act as a soft middleware buffer, translating Sentinel's core API logic to suit their old specs without breaking anything. They'd been hesitant to try it, until, suddenly, they weren't. Rosa dropped the news around 9:30. Duval's live. I looked up. What? They launched the pilot this morning. Steve told them Sentinel was ready. I hadn't known. I hadn't even finished the deployment notes. They didn't even test staging? I asked. She shrugged. Apparently Lucas gave them a walkthrough last night. My mouth went dry. I opened the logs. Started watching in real time. Nothing broke yet. Requests came in. Authentication succeeded. JSON payloads parsed. The middleware did what it was supposed to do. But there was a problem. Lucas had customized the handshake. He'd hard-coded one of the fallback conditions, a temporary patch I'd included in the dev build weeks ago, strictly for sandbox use. It wasn't meant for production. And if Duval triggered it, it would loop the response and hang the export function indefinitely. I checked the timestamp. Lucas had pushed the change at 11:38 p.m. the night before. No PR, no review, just a silent overwrite. I got up, walked to Steve's office. He was mid-call but waved me in. I waited. When he hung up, I said, Lucas made an unauthorized deployment to a live client with unapproved logic. Steve blinked. He what? I laid it out, showed him the line, the logs, the time. He leaned back, rubbed his temples. Is it stable? For now, but if they run batch exports today, it'll break. You can fix it? Yes. Then fix it. Just like that. Not why Lucas touched it. Not how he got access. Just fix it. I did. Wrote a silent patch. Redeployed in 10 minutes. No downtime. Duval never knew, but I did. And so did Steve. And so, eventually, did HR. Because I'd started documenting everything. Every override. Every Slack thread where Lucas volunteered for things I'd built. Every unacknowledged assist I made to keep projects from burning down. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. And clarity, in a company like ours, is currency. You don't shout, you show. So I compiled it all into a calm, clear report. 3 pages, labeled Role Discrepancy and IP Attribution Concerns Internal. I didn't send it yet, but I saved it as a PDF, time-stamped it, put it in a folder called When It's Time. Friday afternoon, the time came. Steve pulled me aside, closed his door. Tom, he started, we've been reviewing structure, trying to formalize leadership across initiatives. I nodded slowly. He continued, you've essentially been leading back-end innovation the past month, quietly, but it's clear. I waited. No smile, no relief, just waited. Steve exhaled. We'd like to formally move you into the lead back-end architect role. Title bump, comp review to follow next cycle. No mention of Lucas, no apology, just acknowledgement. Okay, I said. That's it? That's it. Steve stood, offered a handshake. I took it, but inside something bristled, because I knew what was next. They wouldn't confront Lucas. They'd just quietly move him, reassign him, let the story evolve without naming what actually happened. Sure enough, Monday morning came with a new Slack update. #product handoff. Please welcome Lucas to the new Growth Initiatives team. He'll be supporting experimental tools and outreach modules. No farewell, no fanfare, just a quiet relocation. He was no longer my shadow. He was someone else's now. That afternoon, I went to Rosa's desk, dropped a flash drive on the corner. What's this? The full Sentinel build, with all the original commits. Commented, clean. She looked up. Why are you giving this to me? Because you're the only one who didn't look away when it mattered. Rosa frowned. You're leaving? I smiled. No. Then why does this feel like goodbye? Because I don't need to own it anymore. That night, I walked home instead of driving. The rain had cleared. Streets were wet but soft. Portland had that early fall smell. Earth, leaves, old sidewalk. I passed the corner coffee shop where I used to sit before work on Thursdays. They still hadn't fixed the flickering bulb above the patio. Still made the best black coffee on the block. I stopped, went inside, sat down with a notebook. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't write code. I wrote notes for the next thing. Not out of fear, out of freedom. 3 months later, Sentinel went live for our top-tier client package. Not in beta, not as a sandbox, full production. By then, we'd restructured half the back-end team. I'd been quietly promoted again, this time with budget authority, dedicated dev resources, and a dotted line report directly to Brandon Fan from Strategic Ops. I didn't ask for it, didn't negotiate for the bump. I think they just figured out what would keep me here. But here's the thing, no one expects when you win something like this. It doesn't feel like a win. Not at first. It feels like the noise finally stopped, like a pressure valve clicked shut. And you realize how long you'd been clenching your jaw. Lucas was still at the company. Different department, different projects. We didn't speak. I saw his name in a few Slack threads, a couple of Jira comments. He was working on something called Momentum, a new outbound analytics product with heavy sales integrations. Someone else's sandbox, someone else's ladder to climb. And I had no interest in kicking it. Rosa got promoted too. She became our internal tools lead, took over maintenance of Sentinel's client dashboards. One Friday afternoon, she messaged me, "Rosa, 3:14 p.m. Remember that ghost you said I drew?" Me, 3:15 p.m. "Yeah." "Rosa, 3:15 p.m. It's still in there. Check the footer in the admin console." I opened the console, scrolled down, in tiny gray font, embedded in the bottom left corner, "Built by the ghosts who stayed late." I laughed. It wasn't bitter. Not anymore. A week later, I got an email. Subject line, IP inquiry, Hembry v4 series attribution. Sender, legal department. Apparently, Duval Partners, our client from earlier, was doing due diligence for a merger, and they wanted to trace IP history for every product that touched their infrastructure. Paper trail, authorship, ownership, standard stuff. But it forced the company to audit commit history, and the chain led back to me. Not Lucas, the original logic tree, the middleware patch, even the failover protocol Lucas had accidentally hard-coded. I'd built the prototype for that months before. He'd just renamed it. Legal called me in for a 20-minute interview. I answered plainly, didn't embellish, didn't accuse, just told the story in git commits and dates. By the end, the legal counsel nodded. "We might need a statement of authorship." I shrugged. "You already have it." The next day, Brandon Fan called me into a meeting with Steve in HR. They weren't nervous. They were cleaning house. Lucas was being reassigned again. This time it was lateral. No dev ownership, just maintenance work. Steve asked if I had anything I wanted to add. I looked at him, at Brandon, then at the HR rep. "No," I said, "I'm good." They nodded. That was it. No need for drama. No satisfaction speech. Just a door that quietly closed. Months later, I found the original sticky note in my backpack. The one I'd written after Lucas copied my helper library. It said, "Remember." I smiled, then tossed it, because I didn't need it anymore. One Thursday, Rose and I grabbed coffee near the office. She stirred her drink slowly. "You think he'll do it again?" she asked. "Lucas?" "Yeah." I nodded. "Probably." "Someone else's code?" "Someone else's story." She exhaled. "Doesn't it bother you?" I took a sip. "No," I said, "because the people who matter can tell the difference now." She looked at me. "You ever gonna write about it?" I thought for a second, then said, "Maybe." That night, I sat at my desk and opened a blank file. Not code, not a roadmap, a story, not for the company, not for LinkedIn clout, just for me. The story of how I trained my replacement. And then watched him take what wasn't his, and how I took it back, without raising my voice, without trashing his name, without playing their game, just by staying in the room long enough for the truth to surface. So if you're reading this now, maybe in a break room, or a subway seat, or the last hour of a long night shift, Know this: your work matters, even when no one's looking. The things you build hold your fingerprints, even if someone else tries to wipe them off. So keep building, keep documenting, and when the time comes, deploy with your name on it, because nothing hits harder than a quiet win they can't rewrite. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.